kind of the Goswami that the least is known about him, partially because he didn't write any books, whereas all the other Goswamis have books. So Raghunath Bhatta Goswami's father was a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya, Tapani Mishra, and he met Lord Chaitanya when Lord Chaitanya was performing his Sankirtan pastimes in Bengal. He was from East Bengal. And Lord Chaitanya actually instructed him that he should go to Benares. So as we know, all the Lord's divine pastimes, he has his plan. So he situated his particular devotees in particular places for this plan, his divine plan. And he had that plan that he wished to go to Benares and he wished to convert the Mayavadis to Krishna consciousness. So he chose Benares for Tapani Mishra and Chandrasekhar. Chandrasekhar was a doctor, Tapani Mishra was a Brahmana. So a couple of years after they relocated to Benares, Raghunath Bhatta took his birth. I think it was in 1505. So when Lord Chaitanya finally did go, he went to Benares. He stayed at the house of Chandrasekhar, but he took his meals with Tapani Mishra. So of course there's his beautiful son Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Raghunath, and he was so eager to do service for the Lord. So the Lord allowed him to massage his feet and legs and to wash his plates. So for 2 months this Raghunath, young Raghunath, was in ecstasy to be able to do that service for Lord Chaitanya. And then when Lord Chaitanya left, he was stricken with separation. And that feeling of separation, it became a longing to associate with Lord Chaitanya, so much so that as soon as he reached his early 20s, he left Benares and he went to Puri to meet Lord Chaitanya. And when he did meet Lord Chaitanya, it was a very loving exchange. Of course, Lord Chaitanya recognized him as that boy who'd done that service, and he actually embraced him. And he asked, of course, about Tapani Mishra and Chandrasekhar. And then he arranged for his dear, dear devotee, Swarup Damodar, to find him accommodation. And he would allow Raghunath Bhatta to come and take his meals with him. And at that time he would instruct him on Krishna consciousness to sort of increase his Vaishnava understandings and longings. So yes, at that time also Raghunath Bhatta started to cook for Lord Chaitanya, and actually it's described that he was a very good cook and that anything he cooked tasted like nectar. So much so that whatever he ate for Lord Chaitanya, because of the devotion there, Lord Chaitanya would eat anything that Raghunath Bhatta cooked. And he became well known for that, for his cooking. So he spent 8 months there with Lord Chaitanya, and then Lord Chaitanya said, please go back, your parents are old, please go back and take care of them, and then you can come back. So for, I think, 4 years he took care of his parents in Benares, and then he came back to Lord Chaitanya in Puri, but he only was to spend another 8 months, because then Lord Chaitanya requested him to go to Vrindavan and take shelter of Rupa and Sanatana Goswamis. So he actually gave him some neck beads right from his neck. So Raghunath Bhatta always honoured those neck beads, and when he would be meditating on Krishna, he would wear those neck beads. And also he gave him some betel nut and a huge garland from Lord Jagannath, 10-foot garland of tulsi manjaris. So he kept all these and he would put them on, and he would relish the fact that Lord Chaitanya had given them and where they'd come from, and they would sort of be further attributes for his ecstatic feelings. So before Lord Chaitanya sent him to Vrindavan to take shelter of the Goswamis, he gave him 2 instructions. He said, please chant Hare Krishna and read Srimad Bhagavatam continuously. So the wonderful thing about all these 6 Goswamis who were actual disciples of Lord Chaitanya, because they got given the Maha Mantra and given instructions by Lord Chaitanya, is that their instructions differed. So this was Raghunath Bhatta's instruction. You just read Srimad Bhagavatam continuously and relish it. So when he went to Vrindavan, he would give Srimad Bhagavatam classes, and he was a beautiful singer, and he would sing each verse 3 or 4 times in different tunes. So it would be very relishable for the devotees to hear. And then he would give these wonderful discourses, and sometimes he would just have to stop because his whole body would erupt in ecstasy, and he just couldn't go on any longer. So, it's also described that the demigods used to love to hear Raghunath Bhatta speak. So it's described that Brihaspati and Vyas and all the demigods used to come and feel ecstasy hearing Raghunath Bhatta speak. So they wouldn't have come in their forms. I just have to tell a little story. This happened in Sydney in 1973 when Srila Prabhupada was visiting. He went to the town hall, and I didn't get to go that night because I was looking after the deities. And but there was this we used to call them weekend ecstasy crew in those days. So that were the people that would come on the weekend, and they would love Krishna, but they couldn't get initiated or anything. They weren't that sort of determined, but they loved to come and serve. And anyway, he used to say that he could see auras, and he came back from that town hall program at night, and he told us the next day that actually in that town hall program there's like an area above, and then Prabhupada was in the main area, so he could see these shining figures seated in the area above, in the seats above where the devotees were. And there weren't heaps of people there, but there was all these effulgent, obviously demigods, and he described that in the middle, not standing on anything, just on air, was this, and he made a perfect description of Narad Muni. He had this veena, and he was describing Narad Muni. So this is Raghunath Bhatta's, was happening when Raghunath Bhatta was giving classes. The demigods were coming, though I suppose most people couldn't see them. So sometimes he would just swoon in love of Krishna as he gave his classes. With a faltering voice, he'd have tears and trembling, and sometimes he would just faint. So the nice qualities of Raghunath Bhatta are, he had so many. His complete humility. Also the fact that he never criticized, and he never ever heard mundane talk. He wouldn't hear mundane talk, gossip or criticism. He just felt like everybody's serving Krishna and just gave that respect. And also, for himself, that way he was able to remain immersed in the Srimad Bhagavatam. He just loved the Srimad Bhagavatam. It became his life and soul, as Lord Chaitanya had wished for, and he lived a very holy life there. His samadhi, I think, is on the bank of Shamkund Radhakund. And it's described that, like the Gaura Ganadesha Deepika always has that people are this or that Manjari, but he's described as Rasa or Raga Manjari. So that's Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. So then I thought Raghunath Dasa Goswami, Raghunatha Dasa Goswami was unique among the 6 Goswamis because they were actually all born in Brahmin families. And we know that Rupa and Sanatan, because they were working for the Mohammedan government, they were not, they considered themselves as Muslims and very low and very fallen, but actually they took their birth in Brahmana families. But Raghunath Das is the only one who took his birth in a Kayastha Shudra family. But they were very exalted and aristocratic. That was just their caste. But he was not from a Brahmana family. He appeared in Satyagram in West Bengal, and his family was very rich. He had his father Govardhan and his uncle Hiranya had no other issues, so he was like the one, and they gave him everything. So he actually was always very inclined towards spiritual life, and Balaram Acharya, I believe that was he was a great Vaishnava in that area of Satyagram, and he introduced Raghunath Das at a young age to Haridas Thakur. So he was already inclined against material enjoyment, and now he met Haridas Thakur. So Haridas Thakur just sort of entered his heart, and he became so transformed by that meeting with Haridas Thakur. So he became just completely interested in wanting to meet Vaishnava saints. He wanted to meet Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda. He wanted to meet all those devotees, and that became, such a burning desire for him. So when he had a lot of spiritual insight even when he was a boy. So when he was 15 years old, he heard that Lord Chaitanya had come to Shantipur. So he decided that he would run away and go to Shantipur because he thought his parents wouldn't allow it. They were very observant of everything he did and strict. They were actually very charitable, but they weren't, Lord Chaitanya described that they weren't pure Vaishnavas. So he ran away to Shantipur, and there he saw Lord Chaitanya. So when he met Lord Chaitanya, he fell in a rapture of love at the Lord's lotus feet. And Lord Chaitanya then took his feet and put them on Raghunath Das's head. And for a whole week he got to serve Lord Chaitanya, and he was completely ecstatic. But of course then he had to go home. But he became mad after that, and he just wanted to be with Lord Chaitanya. So he was guarded day and night so that he didn't run away again. So Lord Chaitanya came a second time to Advaita Acharya's house in Shantipur, and again Raghunath Das went to visit him. This time he got the permission of his father. His father allowed it. And so he went again, and once again had a wonderfully ecstatic few days again in the Lord's service. So at that time, Lord Chaitanya said to him, "Be patient, don't be a crazy fellow. By and by you'll cross the ocean of material existence. For the time being, enjoy the material world in a befitting way, but don't be attached. Keep yourself faithful in the heart, but behave like an ordinary man. Thus Krishna will be pleased and will deliver you. Then you can come to me in Puri after my Vrindavan trip. Think of a trick to escape. Krishna will reveal a way." And then he said, "If someone has Krishna's mercy, no one can check him." So he really gave his grace and blessings to Raghunath Das. So Raghunath Das then went back to his father's place, and he followed Lord Chaitanya's instructions not to be a crazy person. But still in his mind, this is all he wanted. So his parents got him married to a beautiful, beautiful, very qualified wife, and he had this wonderful life where he had all opulence, but in his mind he was simply waiting for the association of Lord Chaitanya and his devotees. So then he heard that Lord Nityananda had come to where's that place where he came? Panihati. So this time, I think at that time the mother was saying, why don't you bind him to the father? And the father says, he has the opulence of Indra and a wife as beautiful as an angel. How will ropes work? Lord Chaitanya has given him his mercy. Who can keep a madman of Lord Chaitanya? So then he went to visit Lord Nityananda at Panihati on the bank of the Ganga. So from a distance he offered obeisances to Lord Nityananda, and Lord Nityananda called him forward, and he grabbed him and he put his feet on his head and he said, "You're a thief," because he was offering obeisances in the distance, and he gave him all blessings. And then he said, "I shall punish you." Put his feet on his head, and then he said, "Now I want you to create a festival here, a chipped rice festival, and this will be your punishment." So to this day, that festival is called the Danda, the punishment, the rod, the punishment festival, the Danda Panihati festival, because it was a punishment from Lord Nityananda. So everybody was, it was arranged, Raghunatha Das was very happy to do this, and everybody had 2 pots, and one was filled with chipped rice and yogurt, and another one was filled with chipped rice and condensed milk, and there was a huge festival. All the brahmanas and saintly people and devotees around heard about it, and they all came. In the end there was no room. Lord Chaitanya had all these devotees up on a platform for him, and then people were just sitting along the Ganges, and they were washing their chipped rice in the Ganges and sort of half submerged in the Ganges. It was just so, people were so ecstatic to have Lord Nityananda's association and all the other associates. Lord Chaitanya was not there at the time, he was in Puri. So as this festival went on, of course there was chanting and dancing and feasting on this prasad. Lord Nityananda was taking morsels, and he actually brought Lord Chaitanya there. So he was taking morsels and placing them into Lord Chaitanya's mouth. Lord Chaitanya's mouth was taking morsels and placing them in Lord Nityananda's mouth. They were laughing, and this was seen by Raghunatha Das. He had that blessing. There was some devotees saw this festival of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda there at Panihati. So it's just like later on at that festival in Khetri that Narottam Das had, he brought Lord Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya. They left the planet and he brought them there. At that time, everybody saw them. At that festival, there were thousands, and everybody saw Lord Nityananda and Lord Chaitanya come. At this festival, the elevated devotees saw Lord Chaitanya there. So it was a wonderful sort of turning point for for Raghunatha Das. Also, Lord Nityananda called out to everybody, "Please give your blessings to Raghunatha Das." So it just goes to show the importance of the devotees' blessings. He had Lord Chaitanya's blessings, he had Lord Nityananda's blessings, but Lord Nityananda asked everybody to bless him. So he was so ecstatic, Raghunatha Das, after this wonderful festival, and so determined then about spiritual life. So once he got home, daily he'd pretty much try to run away, and the servants would bring him back. It was the whole thing. It went on for some time. And then, because Lord Nityananda said you'll be freed, in a few days there was a circumstance, anyway I won't go into it, but he was freed. And he ran away on the private roads, he didn't go on the main roads, because the servants would find him. And he took 1 month to get to Jagannath Puri, and on that 1 month he ate 3 times. So by the time he got to Puri, he was already very skinny. And Lord Chaitanya was so happy to see him. They had a beautiful, a rapturous meeting, and immediately Lord Chaitanya gave Raghunatha Das to his dear devotee Swarup Damodar, "Please take care of him." So Swarup Damodar then became his conduit. And even if Raghunatha Das wanted to ask things, he would ask through Swarup Damodar, because Swarup Damodar was so dear to Lord Chaitanya. But one time he did ask directly and for instructions. And at the time, Lord Chaitanya told him, well, Swarup Damodar can tell you everything. But he said to him, do not talk like people in general or hear them. Don't eat very palatable food, nor should you dress nicely. Don't expect honor, but offer all respects to others. Always chant the holy name, and in your mind render service to Radha and Krishna. And then he quoted this Shikshashtakam, the third verse about humility and being more humble than the grass and more tolerant than a tree. So I was going to read a couple of verses from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. They were his instructions. He kept those instructions and fully followed them all his life. More and more. In fact, even in Puri, people used to come to see that he pretty much stopped eating. You know, there's a whole story about he lessened and lessened and lessened, became more and more austere until he would just get the grains that the shopkeepers had thrown out, the grains that had gone bad, and the rice, and he would take that rice and wash it. And then he would eat that. And Lord Chaitanya came once and said, what are you doing? You're having this feast and you're not giving me some. And he ate some, but then Swarup Damodar stopped him. So this was Raghunatha. He so much followed those instructions. We can't imitate, you know, there's certain activities, we can't imitate this, but we can take an example of that wonderful humility and that devotion and love that fueled everything that Raghunatha did. I just wanted to read a couple of little verses here. This is from the Antya-lila, chapter 6. Because Raghunatha's father was always sending money, this, that and the other, and initially Raghunatha used to arrange cooking and for Lord Chaitanya and feasts, and slowly he just became more and more renounced. And then, okay, so Raghunatha is a disciple of Yadunandan Acharya, that was his family guru, who is very gentle and extremely dear to Vasudev Dutt. Because of Raghunatha's transcendental qualities, he is always more dear than life for all of us devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Since he has been favoured by the abundant mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is always pleasing, vividly providing a superior example for the renounced order. This very dear follower of Swarup Damodar Goswami is an ocean of renunciation. Who among the residents of Nilachala does not know him very well? Second verse. Because he is very pleasing to all the devotees, Raghunatha Das Goswami easily became like the fertile earth of good fortune, in which it was suitable for the seed of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to be sown. At the same time that the seed was sown, it grew into a matchless tree of the love of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and produced fruit. So Raghunatha Das, eventually he got those instructions from Lord Chaitanya. He spent 16 years in Jagannath Puri. He was serving Lord Chaitanya. He was able to serve personally Lord Chaitanya, and then Lord Chaitanya had told him afterwards he should go to Vrindavan. But when Lord Chaitanya left, he remained in Jagannath Puri 2 or 3 years until his dear Shiksha Guru Swarup Damodar left. And then he went to Vrindavan. He went to Vrindavan and he decided to jump off Govardhan Hill because he was in so much separation from Lord Chaitanya and from Swarup Damodar. So went to Puri with that in mind. But when he met the Goswamis, they convinced him that he should not do that, that the service of Lord Chaitanya required him to stay and follow those instructions. and he acquiesced. So most of the Goswamis were living in Vrindavan, but he chose to live on the banks of Radhakund. Now Radhakund was so beautiful then. There weren't wasn't all, there weren't many, there were just a few sages and saints living in Radhakund. So he didn't construct a cottage. He was just out there meditating on Shri Krishna. And Sanatana Goswami passed one day and was watching what was happening. Raghunatha Das was meditating on Krishna, and then a tiger and tigress came and started drinking out of Radhakund water and went off again. And then Sanatana was like, "What are you doing? You need to build a hut." But Raghunatha Das was very renounced. He just slept on the bare earth. He didn't do that. And then another day, Sanatana was passing, and Raghunatha Das was sitting. It was really, really hot, and he was sitting in meditation there, absorbed in the Lord's pastimes, because that was one of the instructions of the Lord, that he should, very much follow all the principles of renunciation, and he should meditate on his eternal relationship with Radha and Krishna. So he was doing this completely absorbed, unaware. And Srimati Radharani actually came and she took her veil and she held out her veil over his head. And she was perspiring. Sanatana Goswami saw this, and then he went to him, "You can't do this. Why should Radharani come in your service?" And at that time Raghunatha Das built a little cottage. So he lived there on the banks of Radhakund. So he he decided that he saw people coming and washing their clothes in Radhakund, and he felt like this is not good, they're bathing and washing their clothes in Radhakund. So he decided to build a well by the side of Radhakund, and he built a well, and as they were digging down, excavating, they hit something and there was blood coming. So then Raghunatha Das was like in fear, "Oh no, I've made a terrible offense." And that night in a dream, it was Govardhan revealed, "This is my tongue." And it's okay. So he took that and he worshipped that tongue. That you can see, you would have all probably seen Radhakund and that tongue of that Raghunatha discovered, Govardhan's tongue, which is worshipped, plus the well was then completed. So he was always absorbed in Radha Krishna's pastimes. He was either Rasa Manjari or Rati Manjari. There's always a bit of difference in who people write that he was, but he was a Manjari, and he has a beautiful samadhi there on the side of Radhakund. It's so peaceful and beautiful there. He wrote at least 30 books. His main books are Manashiksha, Stavavali, Mukta Charita, Shivalap Kusamanjali, but he wrote 30 books. And it's described, at the end of his life he was practically eating a few drops of buttermilk every day. That's it. And 22 hours was devoted to his chanting and service. He would offer Dandavat Parikram. I heard Srila Prabhupada in 71, he was giving this talk about Raghunatha Das and how he would do this Dandavat Parikram. So, I don't know, has anybody done it? Dandavat Parikram of Radhakund? Huh? Oh, okay, yeah. Well, we got to do it on Vrindavan Parikram one year. Rasarani and I got up at 5. We left the accommodation at 5, and it took us till about 7:30 to go all the way around Radhakund and do Dandavat Parikram. It's very far out, but I tell you what, we were young, but we were nearly dead. But Raghunatha Das did it every day. He offered obeisances to 2,000 Vaishnavas every day. He chanted hundreds of thousands of names of Krishna, and he wrote all these books. And Prabhupada said sometimes he couldn't even have that 1.5 hours for eating and sleeping because he was too busy. So, we can't in any way imitate, but we can glorify, we can beg for his mercy, to have that humility and that determination to follow the Guru. So, he left his body in 1571, aged 76. Okay, Krishnadasa Kaviraj. It's a bit of a rush. So, Krishnadasa Kaviraj is not his family name, that's his devotional name. He was born in 1496 at Jamatpur near Bardwan in a family of physicians. His father and mother died when he was young, and he and his brother Shamdas were brought up by relatives. So right from the start, he was very devoted. He always worshipped Gaunitai. He installed these beautiful deities still at his birthplace of Gaunitai. They're quite big deities, neem deities, yellow neem deities that he worshipped. They used to have Sankirtan all the time. I wanted to read a little bit. A little extract from the Adi Leela. And this was when Minikatan Ram came to visit. Minikatan Ram was a very dear devotee of Lord Nityananda, and he came to visit because they were always having kirtan, Sankirtan. That was his life. He didn't marry. His life was worshipping Gaunitai. So Minikatan came and he danced and sang at a festival they were holding. So at the end of that festival, Minikatan Ramdas went away, offering his blessings to everyone. At that time, he had some controversy with my brother. My brother had firm faith in Lord Chaitanya, but only a dim glimmer of faith in Lord Nityananda. Knowing this, Sri Ramdas Minikatan Ram felt unhappy in his mind. I then rebuked my brother. These two brothers are like one body. They are identical manifestations. If you do not believe in Lord Nityananda, you will fall down. If you have faith in one and disrespect the other, your logic is like the logic of accepting half a hen. It would be better to be an atheist by slighting both brothers than a hypocrite by believing in one and slighting the other. So then Ramdas broke his flute in anger and went away. So Ramdas used to hit people with his flute, and if you got hit by that flute, you got ecstatic love. So everybody was like lining up to get hit with that flute. But he would only hit that flute on special devotees. Anyway, he broke this flute and went away. So so now, what happened is that night, because of Krishnadasa Kaviraj's good quality in glorifying Lord Nityananda came to him that night. So this is a very beautiful description, that Lord Nityananda appeared to him in a dream. This is to Krishnadasa Kaviraj. I fell at his feet, offering my obeisances, and he then placed his own lotus feet upon my head. Arise, get up, he told me again and again. Upon arising, I was greatly astonished to see his beauty. He had a glossy blackish complexion, and his tall, strong, heroic stature made him seem like Cupid himself. He had beautifully formed hands, arms, legs, and eyes like lotus flowers. He wore silk cloth with a silk turban on his head. He wore golden earrings on his ears, golden armlets and bangles. He wore tinkling anklets on his feet and a garland of flowers around his neck. His body was anointed with sandalwood pulp, and he was nicely decorated with tilak. His movements surpassed those of a maddened elephant. His face was more beautiful than millions upon millions of moons, and his teeth were like pomegranate seeds because of his chewing beetle. His body moved to and fro, right and left, for he was absorbed in ecstasy. He chanted Krishna, Krishna in a deep voice. His red stick moving in his hand, he seemed like a maddened lion. All around the four sides of his feet were bumblebees. His devotees, dressed like cowherd boys, surrounded his feet like so many bees, and also chanted Krishna, Krishna, absorbed in ecstatic love. Some of them played horns and flutes, others danced and sang, some offered betel nuts, and others waved a chamara fan about him. Thus I saw the opulence of Lord Nityananda Swarup. His wonderful form, qualities and pastimes are all transcendental. I was overwhelmed with transcendental ecstasy, not knowing anything else. Then Lord Nityananda smiled and spoke as follows. Oh, my dear Krishnadasa, do not be afraid. Go to Vrindavan, for there you will attain all things. After this he directed me toward Vrindavan by waving his hand. Then he disappeared with his associates. I fainted and fell to the ground. My dream broke, and when I regained consciousness, I saw that morning had come. And that very second in the morning he started for Vrindavan after getting that beautiful instruction from Lord Nityananda. So he never, when he reached Vrindavan, his policy was never to speak about his previous life. He never said a word about his previous life. He also lived in a cottage, and he lived in a cottage next to Raghunatha. So they were neighbours. Not only were they neighbours, Krishnadasa Kaviraja considered Raghunatha his guru, his Sikh guru. And when Raghunatha lived with Swarup Damodar all those 16 years, he had access to Murari Gupta's diaries. So Murari Gupta had written about the early pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. And Raghunatha Das remembered everything from those diaries. And he then, when he was in Vrindavan, Raghunatha Das, or in Radhakund, he would speak about Lord Chaitanya's pastimes because he had read all the early pastimes, and then he had lived there with Lord Chaitanya for all those years and served him. So he knew the later pastimes. So at the time, Vrindavan Das Thakur's book, what's it called? Chaitanya Bhagavatam, was in circulation, and everybody was reading it, and everybody was like really relishing it. So, but the later pastimes had not been written down. So the devotees used to come and they used to relish hearing Raghunatha speaking about Lord Chaitanya, but they wanted that these pastimes not be lost. So they went to Krishnadasa Kaviraja, because he was a poet, he was a good writer. They asked him, please write down Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. So he was very respectful always to Vrindavan Das Thakur, and he did not elaborate on anything that Vrindavan Das Thakur had written. So, but he wrote mainly on Lord Chaitanya's later pastimes. And there are in the Chaitanya Charitamrita something like 24,000 verses. And he began writing. He was old. When Lord Nityananda told him to go to Vrindavan, he was already old. So even in the book Chaitanya Charitamrita, he's saying, my hands shake, I'm an invalid, still I write. And he attributed all that to Madan Mohan, I think So he was very humble, Krishnadasa Kaviraja, to write such a great book, which is so kind of pivotal for us all, that we still study that book. I just wanted to read a little bit, just 4 verses here. 2, 5. Hang on. Yeah. Okay, so he wrote, I'm more sinful than Jagai and Madai, and I'm lower than the worms in the stool. Anyone who hears my name loses the results of his pious activities. Anyone who utters my name becomes sinful. Who in this world but Nityananda could show mercy to such an abominable person as me? So he was very humble, and his mood throughout the whole of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, at the beginning he invokes the blessings of the Panchatattva and Lord Chaitanya's devotees, and at the end he's praying for the mercy of Rupa and Raghunatha. because Rupa and Raghunatha were his Shiksha gurus. So he finished. You know, he would write like codes in the beginning in case he couldn't finish. But Krishna gave him that energy. I think he lived till his 90s. Krishnadasa Kaviraja. He was very old. There, living on the banks of Radha Kund. So he was either Kasturi Manjari or Ratnareka Manjari. So all of these devotees are Manjaris. He wrote 3 books. He wrote the Govinda Lilamrita, which is like the pastimes, the daily pastimes of the Lord. And he wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he wrote the Sangha Rangada Kangeda Tika, which is a commentary on the Krishna Karnamrita by Bhuvamangal Thakur. So those 3 books he wrote. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta has stated that Chaitanya Charitamrita is his favourite book. And that if there was just one book in the whole world left and it was Chaitanya Charitamrita, there'd be no loss. Of course there'd be a loss, but his point is that Srimad Bhagavatam, the realizations of Srimad Bhagavatam are exhibited in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and it's like the postgraduate study of Srimad Bhagavatam. And he also predicted that people would learn Bengali in order to read Chaitanya Charitamrita in the future. So, of course, those predictions are correct. So, on the disappearance and appearance days of these great souls, they are giving out mercy. So we can think about what we can pray for from them. You know, we can't hope to do, perform the seva that they've saved, but we can pray to imbibe some of the mood of these beautiful devotees. They all had that extreme humility, respect. It's so important, all through the Bhagavatam, the language used in the Bhagavatam is everyone's so respectful to each other. And this is, Lord Chaitanya's devotees had so much love and respect for each other. So at least we can pray for that humility to respect the devotees and glorify the devotees, because everybody who's chanting Hare Krishna is wonderful. They're all on the path back to Krishna. So though we can't imitate, we can pray for that mercy, and if those great souls are kind, we can increase that humility. You really have to be focused on what you want to pray for, but sort of whatever it is, one of the qualities that they have, if we pray, then they're willing on these days to benedict us. So we're already benedicted so much, but we can get a little bit more mercy from them, the great souls. Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, it was a bit of a rush to try to fit everybody in. Does anybody have anything to add? No, Raghunath Bhatta is the one that was the son of Tapana Mishra, Raghunath Bhatta, because that Bhatta is their family surname. And Raghunath Das is the one who, just talking about now, the one who was so renounced, even though he was from a rich family. Yeah, they're different. Yeah, but they both. It's described that they both continually had tears in their eyes because they were relishing the pastimes of the Lord. Raghunath Das. Srup Damodar used to find accommodation for the people, but he especially took care of Raghunath Das, and Raghunath Das served Lord Chaitanya kind of under Srup Damodar, and that was for like 16 years, that association. Raghunath Bhatta came twice to Puri for 8 months, and then Lord Chaitanya sent him to Vrindavan to take shelter of Rupa and Sanatana. Yeah. So they all ended up, the 6 Goswamis all ended up in Vrindavan.
And so they all left their bodies on
Yeah, not the same year. It's
That's quite a thing.
yeah. That's right.
You're wonderful.
Jai. Sorry, did you want to?
Just briefly, you mentioned Raghunatha's diary. My understanding was also through Damodar kept a diary as well.
Yeah.
And that's what, and Raghunatha memorised that diary.
Yes. But he was there anyway. He was always hearing from Sri Damodar, and he had that, like, what do you call it, when you can hear Shrutidar, when you hear and remember. Yeah, so, he did, I believe he did keep a diary, but mainly what I was reading about was Murari Gupta's diary of the early pastimes. Yeah. Jai Vaishnav Thakur ki jai.